What's up, you beautiful bastards? Hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is we had some industry news, so let's talk money. Online, there's always a lot of talk about who is getting paid what, and today's focus is on Instagram. And that's because a company by the name of Hopper has now released their second annual Instagram Rich List. And while the list includes your more standard celebrities, with Kylie Jenner at the top of the list, reportedly getting $1 million per sponsored post. Numbers and rankings Hopper said they got thanks to internal data, influencer rate cards, and publicly available information. And next on the list, they have Selena Gomez at 800K, Cristiano Ronaldo at 750, and the list goes on, but they also had a specific influencer category. And here, starting from the top down, you have the likes of Huda Kattan, who is a beauty influencer, followed by Lele Pons, Zach King, Summer Rae, Cameron Dallas, PewDiePie is listed. And I will say personally, I thought it was very interesting to see this list because obviously the best Hopper can do is they can guess with whatever information they have. What I will say as far as my personal takeaway is I hope some of the information on this list is not accurate. And this doesn't come from a place of, I know a lot of people have the argument of, okay, well, all of these people, they're being overpaid for what they provide the world. That is not my opinion here. The market says what things are worth. When you look at what an athlete does, you're like, okay, that's not worth $30 million a year. But guess what? Based off of the number of people tuning in on TV or on their phones, merchandise sales, ticket sales, the market has decided that that thing is worth that. What I'm saying is I hope that these numbers are not true because the digital influencers should be getting paid as much, if not more, than your modern day celebrity. Some people attribute value to the number of followers, number of subscribers you have. My personal takeaway is engagement is the most important metric. Right, like on YouTube, yes, I have over 6 million subscribers, but that's from over the past decade. My daily shows get usually 1.3 to 1.7 million views. And if we look at Kylie Jenner over the past 4 days, her posts in general get between 3 to 7 million likes per post, and her last two non-boomerang videos got 3 million and 7 million views. Then you look to someone that's labeled a digital influencer like a Lele Pons, and you see that her last posts have gotten between 2 to 4 million likes, and her last two videos have gotten over 6 million and 21 million views. Yet Lele Pons is listed at 32,500 a spot. If that is even remotely true, that is a batshit crazy discount. And also understand when I talk about this, we're speaking in generalities, not exacts, because of course there are many different variables, including the audiences of each individual influencer, regionality, age, gender, estimated household income, a ton of things. And understand, I'm not arguing the specific dollar amounts here. What I'm saying is that the gap between digital influencer and mainstream star, I don't think that it should be what it is right now, if this is remotely true. Now, if you were on the other side of this, you could argue, well, Kylie Jenner, she has the TV show, she is a massive in all these other places, but what we're talking about is a specific integration on a specific platform. It gives us the ability to say numbers to numbers, and it is important to acknowledge that what you are on one side does not mean you are that on another. For example, on YouTube, I'm strong. On Instagram, not so much. Summer Rae, who I mentioned, massive on Instagram. Not the largest YouTube channel. The worth is wildly different based off of platform. And I point this out for two reasons. To anyone paying attention, your digital influencers who have been seen as lesser are your new mainstream. And also as a message to my fellow influencers, do not sell yourself short. 0.0% of the advertising industry respected us 8 years ago. It's been a slow trickle. We're only just slowly getting there. And don't let the agencies or middlemen that prey on that low self-worth that some of you have for your content. One of the best ways you can shield yourself from being taken advantage of is to have your own thing to sell first and put into every single video. So technically every video you put out is not just open inventory that was not taken advantage of. I know part of this kind of turned into a digital marketing 101 class, which, hey, colleges, I'm open to being a guest professor, but it's just kind of something I wanted to sound off on because outsiders often discount our communities. Then, in interesting ban news, we look to France. And the reason for that is in a vote of 62 votes to 1 with some abstaining. France has passed a ban on smartphones and other internet-connected devices like tablets for school children between the ages of 3 and 15. And as far as French high schools with students 15 and older, each of those schools will be able to make their own choices here. But it is also important to know that the law has an exemption, specifically for disabled students with extracurricular activities, as well as what they call pedagogical use, which just means teaching. And in general, while the ban has been heavily supported, those who are pushing back seem to be pushing back on two notes. And both have been explained by quotes from Alexis Corbière. He's a former teacher and a deputy from the left-wing Unbowed France party, and he argued, 1, this isn't a 21st century law in our eyes, but a law from the era of news channels and binary debate, and 2, in reality, the ban has already been made. I don't know a single teacher in this country that allows the use of phones in class. And what Alexis is referencing there is a 2010 law and ban, and that ban specifically bans smartphones smartphones during all teaching activity. But it's important to note there is a difference. The students must either turn the phone off completely or just leave it at home. Any use in or out of the class on the property, banned. And as far as my personal takeaway from this, I'm actually a little split because at the beginning of this story, when I first heard about this, I thought, okay, well, that's stupid. I mean, smartphones are such a part of everyone's daily life where we are constantly connected, able to have any and all information in the world readily available at any moment. It's a tool, but at the same time, I really do have to acknowledge it is a massive distraction and stress. Now, granted, I will acknowledge my opinion here can only hold so much weight because this will not affect me. If someone told me the place I'm going to be for the majority of my day, I'm not going to have access to a phone, I'd tell them to go fuck themselves. But still, I also think it's incredibly important for us to disconnect. One of the reasons I don't post a ton outside of doing my show is I constantly try to disconnect. Instead, trying to reserve specific slots of time to both consume and put things out. That way I have pockets of time throughout my day or week where I can just hear myself think. And obviously everyone has a different background, different lifestyles and stuff, but think, when was the last time that you weren't being hit with noise in some manner, whether it be music, something you were reading, watching a video, outside of your electronic device died or you were charging it over there and you didn't get a long cord? And understand, I say this as someone that I am aware that I profit off of people looking at their electronic devices. One of the craziest analytics that YouTube gives us is watch time, the number of minutes watched. And just in the past 28 days, over 319 million minutes were spent looking at my stupid face and hearing the words coming out of my mouth. We're talking over 5 million hours, over 221,000 days. We're talking over 600 years. And yes, if you're wondering, between each jump cut, I am using a calculator. And I'm obviously biased at this point, I think watching my show is a great way to consolidate news consumption. What I would ask you to do is self-audit your life. Look at the devices that you use, what you're doing, and kind of just list it down for yourself. And I'm not saying completely villainize yourself. Also think, what do I get out of this? Right? If you play games or watch Netflix for 1 to 2 hours, maybe you need that. You need that playtime to recoup. I know we've kind of strayed away from the initial topic here because what I'm talking about is very much personal choice, and what France is doing here is putting in place a law. But it's all connected, and so like I said, I give you the task to self-audit, but I will also pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here about this specific ban dealing with schools, as well as other laws, some of which we actually have seen in France before, where companies are limited as to what they can expect from their employees regarding work emails outside of office hours? Obviously, that's a law, it's aimed at businesses, but it's called the right to disconnect. Any and all thoughts, I'm fascinated to hear from you. But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and today in Awesome brought to you by Phil.Ting.com. And Ting, of course, is a fantastic mobile phone service that does things differently, and it's helping people save a lot of money on their monthly cell phone bills. There's no contracts, overage fees, any other carrier tricks. You just pay a fair price for the talk, text, and data you use up every month. You just pay for what you actually use. It gives you that little bit of control over your life that you haven't had. And on the note of just paying for what you actually use, Ting customers pay on average just $23 per month for their one device. And so if you want to make a smart move like many from the nation already have, go to Phil.Ting.com, check your phone's compatibility right now, and if you sign up, you get $25 off your bill or $25 off a new phone in the Ting shop. And the first bit of awesome today is we got a new trailer for Venom, and it looks amazing. Tom Hardy is just a bamf, and I'm excited to see what he does with this role. Then we had Netflix giving us real fathers and daughters reconnecting. We got the Honest trailer for Hook. We had Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman just doing stuff. I mean, honestly, my bar for what is considered awesome when it comes to Nick Offerman is incredibly low. I mean, he can just pretty much do anything. Then, in least surprising awesome news, it's being reported that Incredibles 2 has hit $1 billion at the box office faster than any other animated film. And personally, I say, rightly so. It is a fantastic movie. It makes the first one seem like garbage comparatively. I've probably said it before, but that scene between Jack and the raccoon, possibly my favorite 2 minutes of cinema in the past decade. Then we had First We Feast taking a break from Wings, giving us some pizza awesome. We got some binging with Babish awesome. Then in random 24-hour flash sale awesome. Today, thanks to code July 15th, you can get 15% off the Why Be Informed when you can use your feelings as your fact shirt. It's also available on hoodies and actually now pillows and towels. One of our best sellers, so enjoy if you snag one in the next 24. Then just a quick friendly reminder, we're doing the end of the month DeFranco Elite Town Hall today. I'll link to it down below. A lot to talk about, and of course there's a Q&A attached. And if you want to see the full versions of everything I just shared, the secret link of the day, anything at all, links as always are in the description down below. And then let's talk about this situation around what are being called ghost guns. So 8 states in the District of Columbia are racing to block the nonprofit Defense Distributed from being allowed to upload schematics starting August 1st that would allow people to print 3D firearms. And you may have even seen President Trump this morning tweeting on this situation, saying, "I'm looking into 3D plastic guns being sold to the public, already spoke to the NRA, doesn't seem to make much sense." And the reason we're talking about this today is because of a nonprofit called Defense Distributed and its founder Cody Wilson. And to fully understand the situation, we need to jump back. In 2013, and you might remember this, we talked about this on the show, Wilson and Defense Distributed Distributed developed and fired the first fully 3D printed pistol, the Liberator. The pistol was reportedly made out of the same materials as Legos, and it was good for one shot before destroying itself. Wilson puts his blueprint online, and reportedly within 2 days it was downloaded over 100,000 times. And in addition to that, he also uploaded other designs online, those including 3D components for firearms such as the AR-15 platform. However, the US State Department quickly stepped in. They told him to take the blueprints down, and they claimed Wilson's code for 3D printed components counted as exporting complete firearms, which violated the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, otherwise known as ITAR. So Defense Distributed, they take the files down, but the files were already freely available on the internet because that is how the internet works. And so then the next big thing we see, it's 2 years later, it's 2015, Wilson and his lawyers sue the State Department and the Department of Justice. And Wilson claimed that the government's demands for him to take down the designs violated his First Amendment right to free speech, claiming that he wasn't exporting firearms, instead arguing that he was exporting lines of code, which have been considered protected speech and not in violation of ITAR since the 90s. And during the proceeding, the court received amicus briefs from a broad coalition of groups. I mean, this ranged from the Cato Institute and Republican members of Congress all the way to the Electronic Frontier Foundation and the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. And ultimately, after a 3-year battle, the government finally folded. On June 29th, they reached a settlement with Wilson and Defense Distributed, conceding on all points. And so starting August 1st, Wilson and Defense Distributed will be allowed to share blueprints of 3D printed firearms on their central database. And that decision to settle the lawsuit was highly criticized. And so we saw 21 states write a letter to Jeff Sessions and Mike Pompeo saying the decision was deeply dangerous and could have an unprecedented impact on public safety. We also saw Senator Chuck Schumer speaking about this in early July, saying, "I am sounding an alarm that come August 1st, America is going to get a lot less safe when it comes to the gut-wrenching epidemic of gun violence. Ghost guns are not only scary, they're outright dangerous in the way they can mimic the look and the capacity of a hardened, fully semi-automatic weapon." And so we see Schumer briefly mention that term that I mentioned at the beginning of this story, ghost gun. What is a ghost gun? Well, when someone says ghost gun, they're referring to firearms that aren't registered to any government agency nor have any serial numbers to identify them. Now, in the United States, these firearms are actually widely legal as long as you build the firearm yourself and you have the intention to keep it forever. But it is extremely illegal for you to actually sell or transfer these weapons. Now, while hitting this point, it is also extremely important to note that 3D printed firearms are not the first instances of ghost guns in America. Americans have been building their own untraceable firearms for centuries. But the difference now, and the concern for many gun control advocates, is the barrier to entry. Before the advent of 3D printing, someone could build a firearm but would need the technical knowledge to work the machinery needed. 3D printing changes most of that. Additionally, another large concern, other than you're talking about untraceable firearms, is that the ghost guns bypass a central part of gun control: background checks. If you're someone prohibited from owning a firearm, you could still make your own gun without a background check. Now, obviously, it is still illegal for you to own that firearm, but it's hard for the government to know it even exists. And with the information so widely available, the cost of making a 3D printed gun so low, it allows access to anyone. Whereas before, the crossover of people who were prohibited from owning a gun but had the technical skill to make one was pretty low. Now, some people are trying to say that this is not a big deal. You have a 3D printed firearm, they're not going to be dangerous, they're good for one single shot. And while yes, that was true for the Liberator, that is not the truth for everything we're talking about here. Increases in the quality of plastic have allowed firearms to handle multiple shots. And on top of that, we're dealing with a situation where only certain components of a gun actually need to be 3D printed to bypass a background check. We'll use the AR-15 for example. Random fact, you can buy nearly every component of an AR-15 without a background check legally. And the reason for that is only the lower is actually registered and requires a background check. It's the piece of the weapon actually considered the firearm by the ATF, and it also happens to be one of the easiest components to 3D print. I mean, there were examples of this being done back in 2015. Additionally, there are also concerns that 3D printers will allow groups with money, such as cartels, to more easily produce firearms for their own uses, something they already do, but now to a greater extent. And right now, we're seeing politicians move on this. Chuck Schumer wants to pass a law that bans 3D firearms, and just as importantly, the ability to share files on how to make these weapons. Congressman Seth Moulton from Massachusetts agreed and will introduce a bill to update the 1988 Undetectable Firearms Act in an attempt to ban 3D printed guns. Pennsylvania has successfully locked the release of the files in the state, and since then, the site that I was talking about has been blocked, reportedly by nearly all mobile phone providers, as well as seemingly most states. But of course, the internet is the internet. If people are looking for this, they will end up finding it, especially because, and this brings us back to Cody Wilson and Defense Distributed, he has made clear that he will upload these files regardless of what the US ultimately decides. Cody Wilson is reportedly a self-described post-left anarchist whose mission is to undermine government control, and gun control is just his start. One saying about gun control:
no, gun control is not dead, it's undead. Gun control is undead. And we just keep killing it, but it just keeps coming back.
And reportedly, in addition to releasing these 3D printed schematics for firearms, he also has a solution for steel and aluminum frames. And that's incredibly notable because it lowers the barrier to entry to homemade firearms across the board. Defense Distributed makes a desktop-sized CNC machine called the Ghost Gun, and the machine allows anyone to complete 80% lower, so-called because they're 80% of the way to being a finished firearm, and thus would not require a serial number or background check to purchase. And the thing is, this is just an addition to dozens of companies that have kits that include everything you need to make a full unserialized firearm. And also, maybe it'll give you a a better understanding. Here on the left side, you have an 80% lower, it is incomplete, and then on the right, you have a finished one that would require a background check. You just need to cut out the metal inside. And right now, California has legislation in place that ultimately attempts to solve this issue. You can build your own firearm, 3D printed or traditional metal, but before doing so, you have to apply with the state for a serial number and pass a background check. Then once you're approved, you can build the firearm, but then you have to also submit photos showing you serialize the component of the firearms that it legally requires. In the case of the AR-15, as we mentioned, that's the lower. And California also has plans to pass laws that require a background check to purchase nearly any firearm component, things like triggers, bolts, barrels, etc. Meaning that while you'd be able to build a lower, it would then still be infinitely more difficult to build a complete firearm from scratch. Fully plastic 3D printed ones are usable for multiple shots right now, but in general, they melt after about a magazine worth of shots. But still, with all of that said, this of course does not address the main issue. People who, regardless of whether it would be legal or not, want this weapon to inflict harm will be able to do so. Even if the government manages to block defense distributed, how can they stop all people everywhere? It's the internet. Even if you try and block a singular thing or place, there will always be other places that have this, whether it be right now or after. I mean, you'd have to ban 3D printers or restrict them in some way, and people would always find a way to work around. So the question is there even a way to try to effectively stop this? Maybe I'm a cynic, but I truly don't believe so. And I think that it's very easy to go, oh, well, this isn't a big issue. And my response to that is, sure, until it is. Right? There are a lot of things in our lives that it wasn't a thing, and now it is. There is a reason today that you have to go through a security checkpoint and take your shoes off, and your friends who don't have a ticket can't come with you. I mean, this really shows my age, and I hate that I have examples like this, but I grew up at a time where my dad met me at the airplane gate. And I think an important thing to consider, and I don't know if it's necessarily limited to gun culture, but I think it's kind of a societal thing. In my eyes, there is an inherent desire in a good number of people to have what the government might say that you cannot have. One of the things that comes to mind is the AR-15 was not really the most popular weapon out there. There was a ban, it was then not banned. All of a sudden, sales through the roof, immensely popular. Obviously, you're not talking about an unregistered weapon, but I think in part it kind of speaks to that point. But all of that said, that is the situation. That is my personal takeaway, and I pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts about this? Do you think that there should be a crackdown on this? Even if there is a crackdown, do you believe that it will be effective? I don't know. I think we'll have to wait and see. And actually, that's where I'm going to end today's show. And of course, remember, it's the PDS, whether it be the last story, the first one, anything in between. I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down below. Also, if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button, maybe even ring that bell to turn notifications on so you get alerts when these daily weekday videos come out. It also wouldn't hurt if you followed me on Twitter at PhillyD, since YouTube's notification record, not always stellar. But that said, of course, as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.